All right, welcome back to Winston-Salem State University's Office of Information Technology's ADA tutorial or accessibility tutorial on document accessibility. If you watched part one, which was a Microsoft Word tutorial, this is part two, a PDF document accessibility tutorial, specifically dealing with accessibility using the Adobe Acrobat Pro software. So, like in our Word tutorial, first things first, what we're going to do is show off the accessibility checker that is built into this software. Actually, before that, let me show you how to set up the workspace. There's going to be a few different tools that you're going to need on your workspace, and I'll show you that now. The first thing you're going to need is to look at this toolbar on the left-hand side of your screen. It may be collapsed when you start off with, so if it is, look for this tiny gray bar with a little arrow. Open that up. And then right-click anywhere into the empty space on this bar. So you right-click here, and then it'll give you a list of tools in which you can add to your toolbar. The number one thing, or the first thing I'd like you to add is this content panel. I've already got it here on mine, but it's going to look like something like this if you were to open it. Second thing you're going to want to add, right-click again, and you're going to want to add the order panel here. This is extremely important when we get to editing the reading order of the document. And finally, right-click on that empty space again, and you're going to want to add the tags panel. This can be important, especially when you are editing some more technical aspects of your document. And that's all we need for the left side. Now, we have a few more tools we need to look at. I'm going to close this for now. Over on our right side are a bunch of different toolboxes or tool areas here. And so to add tools to this area, you can click on your More Tools button. And again, there's three things that we're going to want to add. One thing is this Prepare Form area. This is going to help if you are creating a fillable form for accessibility or for any reason. Just click Add if it's not already added to your list. And scrolling down, you are definitely going to need the accessibility tools, so click Add on that if it's not already added. And then finally, you may want the Action Wizard, which has some automatic settings that can be useful. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my document. And so you may recognize this from our last video, this sample taco document, kind of a silly document, but it's good for giving examples for accessibility needs. Now again, like I was saying to start with, we'll begin by using the accessibility checker. It's like Word, Adobe Acrobat has a similar accessibility checking tool that will scan the document for any errors that it can find. To do that, you'll want to open up the accessibility toolbox that we just recently added. And then from here, there is a full check button. Click that, which will open up this dialog box here. Now you can leave all of the settings in their default state and just click on Start Checking. And now this will pull up an accessibility checker on the left-hand side of the screen. It looks a little bit different than what it looks like in Microsoft Word. To see any specific errors, you'll need to expand the little arrows next to the words here. If you see something in bold, like this one right here, document has 3 different issues. I'm going to expand this. And you'll see that it has a few things to look at now. If you followed the first video in Microsoft Word tutorial, we made it absolutely accessible as far as Microsoft Word's accessibility checker goes, but there are a few elements here that the Adobe Acrobat's checker brings up. One is the title area. Adobe PDFs have a title property. One thing that this title property does make this document a little bit easier to find. It helps with SEO, which makes things easier to find through a search engine. So if you want your document to be easier to find through Google or through the Winston-Salem State University website search, having this title field will help it find the pertinent information that your document contains. So to fix this, I'm just simply going to right-click on this particular title error. I'm going to click the Fix button, And this pulls up a dialog box here that will allow me to enter in a title. I'm just going to uncheck, leave as is, give a simple title for my document, all about tacos, and click OK. Once I do that, you'll see that I get a green check over here where that error was. And now you'll notice that instead of an red X that I had for the first error, the other two are these little blue question marks. What that means is, again, this is an area that should be checked, but it's something that can't easily be checked by the software. This is a reminder that these issues need to be checked by a human for accuracy. One is a contrast check here, which basically, again, states that the contrast ratio between the colors in the foreground and the background have to have a strong enough contrast to be easily seen or read. If you just have black text on a white background, that's great. That's extremely high contrast. If you have something that's maybe light blue on a white background, yellow of course, or even a mixture of colors, maybe you have some the color red on a brown background or a green background. While a lot of our accessibility guidelines kind of deal with helping users that are blind, we still need to watch out for other types of disabilities that may be less severe, such as color blindness. So people with color blindness, dealing with color contrast really helps them make sure that they can see everything easily, or just as easily as you or I. Now, some of this can be easy enough to see with the naked eye, especially black text on a white background, but if you really needed to see if something was appropriate contrast or not, you can open up literally any web browser. I'm just going to search for contrast checker. And one of the first links here, this web AIM contrast checker, is a good one. And what you can do is you can click on this, you can choose a specific color and compare it to how it looks on the white background. I'm going to leave this background color white, just like our document. But maybe I've got something weird. I got a light blue text here. It should. Well, this website's not working for me, or at least in this browser. I recommend maybe checking it in Google Chrome or Firefox. I can't seem to get this one to work. Here we go. I'll just work with the lightness here. Now, if it's too light, you'll see that I got a bunch of fails here. So I want to make this dark enough color that I at least get a WCAG AA standard to pass. That's what institutions like ours are required to meet by the federal guidelines, so you at least want to make that AA standard. If you can have the contrast high enough to reach that AAA standard, well, that would be ideal. So if you can do that, go for it. Anyway, that's enough about contrast checking. So anyway, I'm pretty sure that the contrast on our particular document is good enough, so I'm going to right-click and check Pass. And finally, to really ensure that this particular document is accessible, the reading order has to be checked. To do that, we can open up our reading order panel here, and we can see the reading order of all of the elements of the page. Now, reading order isn't automatically going to be left to right, top to bottom like we expect. A lot of times reading order is generated based off of the order in which elements were added to the document. You might see here that most of my text seems to read in order. First thing it will read is all about tacos. The next thing it will read is beef tacos. This is just a blank area that kind of gets skipped over. And fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh, and so on. Now you would think the 10th thing that would get read was just the alternate text that we put into this image. However, because I added this image after everything else was added, after all the text was added, this is actually going to be read as the 21st thing in order that will be read in this document, which is not what we want. Of course, if I've got a picture of a beef taco, I want it to be read with all the rest of my beef taco content in our fun taco sample document here. So if I wanted to correct this in my reading order list over here, I'm going to grab number 21, which is this, and if you click on a number, sometimes it will kind of tell you where it's at. Anyway, I'm going to click on number 21 here, and I'm going to click it and hold down. I'm going to drag up to the place where I want it. So I'm going to put it right underneath the number 9 item here. And now that I do, you'll see that the number here turns to a 10, which means that it's going to be read in the appropriate order. And I can do that with the remaining images as well, like this chicken taco. I can put it in the 16th place. And again with the last remaining taco picture, this is on page 2. So if I scroll down, I want to move this image number 29 and put it right underneath that 2 here. And again, finally, my actual last image is this fish taco. I'll do the same thing for this and put it right underneath this number 10th text in the reading order. And so now those images will be read in the order in which I intended them to be read, right after the related text. Now, this was our good document. Luckily, we had done the smart thing and we did all the remediation to our original Microsoft Word document before we got here. And anytime you can do that, it's recommended to fix any accessibility errors in the native software that you created it in, for a number of reasons. While we can fix all the errors here in Adobe PDF version, we want to fix the original version so that any future updates that we create are also going to have that same accessibility standard that we need in order, and that'll keep us from having to repeat these steps every time we convert it to a PDF in any future updates. So if you can update it in Microsoft Word or whatever the native creation software that you used, do fix things there. But we can't always do that. We don't always have access to the original document. So let's take a look at our bad example. This is the exact same document that we started with in the first tutorial, before we did any accessibility editing to it. So if you watch the Microsoft Word number 1 tutorial, you'll have remembered this document in this state from the very beginning of that video. So let's go ahead and run an accessibility check on this one. And we should see a number of errors similar to what we saw in the original checking of the Microsoft Word version. So we have our same errors here for our document. We also have a few relating to our alternate text for our images, and again we have some issues for the table here as well. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to quickly fix this title error. It's already got my title in there automatically from doing it the last time, so that's great. I'm going to click OK. Now, working with accessibility in Adobe Acrobat can be a little buggy sometimes. It doesn't always work perfectly. And so you might find sometimes that you'll see a red X under your title area here. You might right click it and hit fix, and instead of bringing up that dialog box, it might immediately turn to a green check indicating that it's okay, but that's not always the case. Similar to images with alt text, sometimes there might be a file name put in place of the alt text, or some other auto-generated information. And that can happen with Adobe too. So if it ever automatically turns to that green check without asking you what the title should be, go behind it and check. You can always check behind it and see what that title is by going to the properties. If you go to the File tab, Properties, and you can see where the title I input was. So I'm going to let you know, so I can type in here, and it is indeed an editable field. So if you ever need to come back into these properties and edit the title field, as well as author, subject, and add any keywords, you can. Okay, so we fixed our first error. Now let's look at fixing the alternate text errors here in the Adobe Acrobat. This time I'm going to click on Figure 1. In Adobe, anytime you see the word figure, it really just means an image or a picture. So I'm going to click on Figure 1. You'll see that my first image is highlighted. I'm going to right click, I'm going to click Fix. And this brings up a pretty convenient dialog box here, which will allow me to add alternate text, and then using these arrow buttons kind of go through the remaining images that require alternate text as well. So for this, I'm going to again, add a short description. Let's see here, a beef taco. Oops. And if you didn't watch the first tutorial with Microsoft Word, again, the amount of description you need to add for alternate text varies depending on how relevant that image is to the document. Because this is a very simple tutorial document, I don't need a lot of description for these. But if this was a more complicated document, perhaps it was an anatomy study guide, and perhaps I had an image here with the different bones in the human hand. I would obviously put a lot more description and a lot more detail into my description to make sure that anybody who was having to have this image read to them through a screen reader was able to get just as much information out of it as someone that could see the image itself. So I'm going to hit my next arrow, which will take me to the next image in my document. I'll say this is a chicken taco. I'll click next. I've got a pork taco. Oops. And finally, our last image. Now, before I put alt text for this one, I want to show you what this decorative figure button does here. It's a little checkbox. From time to time, you may have images in your document that aren't necessarily relevant or pertinent to the information you're trying to get across. You might actually have something that is literally just decorative. It could be some border elements. It could just be some stars and shapes that you might have just to highlight certain areas. If it is just purely a decorative image, you can check that decorative figure checkbox. And what that will do is let a screen reader know that it should skip over that as that particular image is not necessarily useful to the user who's listening through a screen reader. But again, typically we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that people using a screen reader are getting absolutely all the same information that someone without visual disabilities is getting. So we want to add a description to our images whenever we can. And again, I'm going to finish this out. All right, and then I'm going to click Save and Close, and that'll add my alternate text to those particular images, and you'll see we have a lot of green checks here on the side that let us know that that was successful. All right, finally, on this accessibility checker, we've got our table issue here, specifically because of the headers that are not yet assigned. Now, almost any time you need to edit a table, especially after the fact that this has been converted to a PDF, it's so much easier to fix a table in Microsoft Word before converting it. So if you can go back to the original document, do so. But if you can't, fixing this is still possible. However, it's just a little bit more technical. All right, I'll show you how to do that. This is actually why we added some of our tools over here to the other side. So I need to add some headers to this, or some background information that lets the screen reader know that this is a header. I'm going to right click on this element 1. I'm going to ask it to show in the tags panel. And you'll see it's over here, right here at the bottom of my tags panel. You'll see everything that's in these brackets. These are called tags. If you are familiar with HTML at all, you'll see these tags are very similar to HTML tagging structure. So what I'm going to do is expand this particular tag and see the contents of it. So I have my table tag, and then these TR tags represent each row of my table. So this is row 1, row 2, row 3, and if I click on one of these rows, you'll see that that particular row is highlighted. And if I were to further expand these rows, you'll see these two TD tags. These represent each individual cell of the table, and they specifically stand for table data tags. So if I click on one of these, you'll see that this one particular, the information in this cell is highlighted, and so on. But for this particular error, we need to concentrate on the cells that are our headers. And so I'm going to open up our first row here. These two cells particularly, I'm going to change these from a table data cell to something more formal, like a table header cell. And actually, let me repeat that. If you highlight any particular one of these tags, and you can highlight them both by using your Shift key, you can right-click go to Properties, and then you're going to want to edit the type of tag this is. So I want to change it from table data cell to a table header cell. Click Close. You'll see the icons next to these particular tags have changed to denote they are now headers. And now if I go back to my accessibility checker, I can right click on this, click on Check Again. It does another scan, and now you see that green check, which lets us know it is a lot happier about this. Now the screen reader has information knowing where the column headers are in this table, making it a lot easier for it to read and a lot easier for it to understand if you were having to listen to this particular table with a screen reader. So this is a basic document, and we looked at a few things. We modified the reading order once in the All About Tacos, the good version that we made, but we want to check one more time for this one as well. So I'm going to open up my reading order panel, and I'll show you a few different techniques that you can use to help your reading order adjustment. And I should have stated this the first time: before adjusting your reading order, save your document. Because Adobe Acrobat is kind of a finicky tool, it has still has some glitches and bugs. You're going to want to save your document, because most things you can undo or use your undo or Control Z keys to kind of undo any mistakes you might make. When it comes to adjusting the reading order, the undo button doesn't work. So you want to make sure that you save frequently, so if you do accidentally make a mistake, you can go back and go back to your last saved version. But before I edit the reading order of this, I'm going to do a few things. Now, this isn't required, but it's a couple tips that I'll show you that I do just to make my work a little bit easier. And this is especially true when this is a more complicated type of document. The first thing I'm going to do is actually get rid of all of the blank cells in my reading order here. So what I'm going to do is hold down my Control key. I'm going to go over here to my reading order list, and you'll see there's a number of these blank areas. Now, if I leave them there, it's not going to cause a problem. The screen reader is just going to skip right over them. But I tend to try to get rid of any of these blank areas just so it's easier for me to understand the reading order as I'm looking at it on the fly. So I'm just going to Control click this number 2 spot, 10, 11, 16, and 17. Hit my delete key and get those out of there, so it's easy for me to see where everything is in the reading order. Again, just like in the first time, I'm going to hit my number 16 item here. I'm going to move it to where it should be up here with the rest of the beef items. And again, for my other image here, this chicken taco, I'm going to move it right up here to where it should be right after that 13. All right, and moving on to my page 2, I've got some of those blank spots again. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit Control. I'm going to click all of these that are superfluous. And I'm going to hit my delete key and get rid of those, just so I have an easier time looking through the rest of this. All right, I've got, this should be in the number 3rd spot. My fish taco should be in the number 7 spot. All right. And then everything looks okay. Now, one thing about this is that you'll notice that in the Adobe version of the accessibility checker, it did not call out our URL here. Now that's because it was just a warning in the Microsoft Word version, but I assure you, anytime you can get rid of a raw URL like this and encapsulate it in actual descriptive text, the better it's going to be. So I'll attempt to do that now without causing too much trouble. You can typically edit your document to some extent in Adobe PDF. So I'm going to click my edit icon up here on the right hand side. I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to cut it out of the document. Cut. All right. And I'm going to attempt to place it into the descriptive text just like we did in Word. It's going to be a little bit different of a method, but let me see what I can do here. So I'm going to go and add a little bit more text to my text box here. I'm going to say the taco trip website, just like I did in the other document. And I can expand this box if I need to, if I want to have all that on one line like it used to be. Alright, and now that I've done that, I'm going to click back over here, close this actually. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm actually going to click up here where all my tools are and click the link option. And I am going to create a link using that URL I just cut or copied to my clipboard. I'm going to hit the add/edit web or document link. And I am going to draw a box around the area I want to turn into a link. It's already set to open a web page. I'm going to click next. I'm going to paste that URL that I just copied there, click OK, and now that box that I created even though we can see the border around it now, this will actually be invisible when our document is finalized. I'm going to click close here. And so we can't see the border, but if I were to hover over the Taco Trip website, you'll see that my cursor changes and you'll see the URL that descriptive text is going to take me. Now, if you wanted to make it look like the way it does in a Word document, you can take that text, you can highlight it, you can make it blue or whatever color, you can underline it to make sure that everybody knows that it is a web link. Click close, and there now it's a lot more obvious that this is a web link to everyone, including people that can't see it, because now that we've added that descriptive text in that link, even people with visual disabilities knows that this is a link, and more importantly, they know where this link is going to take them. All right, so that's it for creating a accessible PDF document. There are more tools to use here. The next video is going to be dealing with PDF fillable form accessibility, which has its own set of rules. And so stay tuned for the next video, and I'll go into more detail on fillable, accessible PDF forms.